Poor Nanny left a birthday card on the table. The lonely CEO read it and changed her life forever. The morning of his birthday began like every other, quiet, controlled, and cold. Julian Blackwood stepped into the kitchen of his hilltop mansion. Sleek countertops, stainless steel appliances. The coffee machine blinked, already filled. The scent of roast beans filled the room. Someone had prepared it. But there were no voices, no greetings, no cheerful surprises. No one dared. The calendar on his phone buzzed. 8 a.m. Board call. 10 a.m. Investor signing. No entry for himself. No birthday. Just another day. Another line on a spreadsheet. Another year. Another number to ignore, he muttered to no one. He reached for his coffee. That was when he saw it. A small note, folded neatly beside the cup. Plain yellow paper, like the kind from a cheap notepad. He paused. The handwriting was soft, almost hesitant. Blue ink, still slightly smudged, like the writer had just set it down minutes earlier. I don't know what to give a man who has everything. So here's a reminder that you're still human. Happy birthday. No name. No signature. Julian stared at it. For a full 10 seconds, the world seemed to quiet. Even the ticking of the clock felt distant. No one in this house would dare something so personal. No one had ever spoken to him like this, not in years. Certainly not on his birthday. He stood motionless. Not angry. Not curious. Something deeper. Something sharp. Memories rushed back without warning. A girl's laughter in a tiny kitchen. His sister Lila, her hands dusted in flour, trying to make him a cake out of pancake mix. Blowing out candles stuck in half-melted chocolate. A plastic flower in a paper cup. His chest tightened. That was the last birthday that meant something. Before the crash, before the funeral, before the silence. Since then, birthdays had become reminders of failure, of guilt. He rejected gifts, ignored calls, stopped celebrating. He didn't believe he deserved love, certainly not celebration. But this was not a gift. It was a message, a whisper against his armor, a tap on a closed door. You're still human. His hand trembled slightly as he folded the note. Why did it hurt so much? How could a few words, scrawled on cheap paper, pierce deeper than any headline, deal, or boardroom betrayal? He slipped the card into his coat pocket, then turned on his heel. Someone wrote that. Someone in his house. But who? He opened the security feed. The hallway outside the kitchen, no movement. Staff had already come and gone. The camera caught no clear moment. He summoned the household. Butler, assistant, cook, gardener, all shook their heads. Finally, his eyes rested on the last staff member, Callie Moore, the nanny, hired just 3 weeks ago for Evie, his 4-year-old niece. She stood quietly by the doorway, blonde hair tied in a neat ponytail, hands folded in front of her, calm, yet somehow present, unusually present. "Did you leave this?" Julian asked, holding up the note. Callie blinked. A soft blush colored her cheeks. "No, sir," she said, voice even, but her eyes, clear, honest, unwavering, did not match her denial. He nodded. Let it drop. But he did not believe her. That night, Julian returned to the security footage. He fast-forwarded to the late evening, after Evie had gone to bed. There, Callie, sitting on the floor of Evie's room, reading softly from a worn book. Evie clutched a stuffed rabbit, head resting on her lap. Callie smiled gently. Then, she stood, kissed Evie's forehead, and turned out the lamp. She walked into the hallway, into the kitchen. She looked around once, calm, unhurried. Then, she pulled a note from her sweater pocket, set it gently beside the coffee mug, and walked away. Julian paused the video. The screen froze on the image of her hand, leaving the card behind. His eyes closed. She didn't want credit, he whispered to himself. She didn't want to be seen. She just wanted me to feel something. He looked down at the folded paper in his coat again. And for the first time in years, he did. Julian was not a man who paid attention to people, at least not beyond business. He had always believed efficiency mattered more than sentiment, results more than effort. But since the note, he found his gaze drifting more often toward the quiet blonde in his house. Callie Moore. She never spoke more than necessary, never lingered, never sought attention. Yet every morning, she was there, on time, hair tied in a clean ponytail, worn shoes squeaking softly across the marble floor, hands carrying crayons and children's books instead of phones and demands. Julian watched from a distance, through open doors, from the hallway, through security cameras he never used unless there was a problem. Evie, his niece, now his ward, had not spoken a word in over a year. After her mother's death, the trauma had locked her voice away in a place no one could reach. No therapist had succeeded. No medication had helped. But Callie, she didn't try to fix Evie. She simply stayed. She read stories in soft voices, drew animals in crayon, sang lullabies off-key. She laid next to the child on rainy afternoons and folded colorful paper cranes while telling tales of how each one could carry a wish to the sky. The guest bedroom soon became a nest of paper birds. Julian once stepped in, expecting the usual cold quiet, and instead saw dozens of haphazardly folded cranes lining Evie's windowsill. "She likes them," Callie had said simply, when she noticed him staring. Julian didn't respond, but he didn't forget. A week after the birthday note, it happened. Julian was sitting in the upstairs study when he heard a sound. Not from his phone, not from the staff. A voice. Small, fragile, uncertain. "Ka." He rose from his chair, walked slowly toward Evie's room. At the doorway, he stopped. Evie sat on the carpet, one hand resting on Callie's knee. She was pointing at a drawing, a stick figure with yellow hair. Callie's eyes welled up, her voice trembled. "Did you say my name, sweetheart?" Evie nodded. Julian stepped back, unseen. His heart clenched, not just because the silence had broken, but because it had not been for him. And he was glad. That same afternoon, a senior manager from his investment team stopped by the mansion for a document signing. The man was sharp-suited, slick-haired, full of arrogance. As he passed Callie in the hallway, he smirked. "New staff?" he asked Julian casually. "Or just someone trying to climb the ladder the old-fashioned way?" Julian paused mid-step. The air turned cold. He looked the man squarely in the eye and replied, voice low but razor-sharp, "If she wanted my attention, I never would have given it." The manager blinked. The tension hung in the air for one long moment before Julian walked off, leaving him in stunned silence. That night, Julian lingered longer than usual in the hallway near Evie's room. He watched Callie tuck the girl into bed, gently pulling a thin blanket over her small shoulders. Then she whispered something Julian couldn't hear, but Evie smiled. Before she left the room, Callie added another crane to the windowsill. Julian finally stepped into the room after she had gone. He picked up one of the paper birds, simple, folded by hand, uneven edges. A small wish, etched on the wing in pencil. Let her speak again. Julian stood there in the soft glow of the nightlight, holding the fragile bird between his fingers. Callie hadn't come to impress anyone. She hadn't even tried to impress him. She was, and for the first time in a long time, Julian Blackwood whispered a silent thank you to a girl who spoke less than most, but somehow said more than anyone ever had. Julian Blackwood had access to every resource imaginable. Background checks were standard protocol for household staff, but he had never looked deeper than what was necessary. Until now. It wasn't out of suspicion. It wasn't even out of curiosity. It was something else. A pull he couldn't explain. One quiet afternoon, when Evie was at speech therapy, Julian sat at his desk with a manila folder. Inside was a brief personal history on Callie Moore, compiled discreetly, without breaching any privacy laws. Her file was short, not because she had something to hide, but because she had so little to show. Callie had lost her mother at 15. No mention of her father, just a dash and the words, "not present in records." She had taken legal guardianship of her younger brother, Micah, at 17, worked part-time while finishing high school, enrolled in a local community college but never completed her degree. Micah had been accepted into a state university with a partial scholarship, but he'd recently withdrawn. Reason: unpaid tuition. Julian closed the file and sat in silence for a long time. That night, without informing anyone, not even his assistant, he reached out to a foundation under his name and instructed a quiet transfer of funds. The next morning, Micah Moore received an email. "Your outstanding tuition balance has been cleared." 2 days later, Callie stood outside Julian's office, her posture tense, one hand gripping the doorframe. He looked up from his computer. "Come in," he said calmly. Callie stepped in slowly, closing the door behind her. Her voice was quiet but firm. "It was you." Julian didn't play dumb. "Yes." Her jaw clenched. "Why?" "I had the means. He needed help." "I didn't ask for help," she snapped. "No one did," Julian replied, his voice still calm. "I wanted to." Callie stepped forward, eyes filled with something between frustration and heartbreak. "Do you think I'm a charity case? That just because I wrote you a birthday note you owe me a favor?" Julian leaned back in his chair, letting the words hang for a beat before responding. "I don't owe you anything," he said quietly, "but I understand what it's like to grow up fast, to lose people, to carry more weight than you should. My sister Lila, she was the one who always reminded me to see people, not just facts, not just numbers. She used to say, if someone reminds you of who you used to be, don't turn away from them." Callie blinked hard, the words hitting deeper than she expected. "I wasn't trying to win you over," she said, her voice cracking. "I wrote that card because I saw a man who had forgotten how to be human, and I thought maybe he just needed to hear it." Julian's expression softened. "I know," he said. She looked away, breathing heavily. "I didn't give you money," Julian said gently. "I gave your brother a second chance." Silence filled the room. Callie exhaled, her shoulders finally dropping. She stepped back, hand on the doorknob. Just before leaving, she turned. "I wrote the card," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "But not for a thank you, not for a reaction." Julian met her eyes. "That's why it mattered." Callie left the room without another word. But for a long while after, Julian stared at the empty doorway, feeling something stir in him again, something quiet, something real. The call came just after 2 a.m. Julian was in his study, working late, as always. The glow from his desk lamp cast long shadows across the bookshelves, papers scattered with financial models, corporate forecasts, and market predictions. He was halfway through another quarterly report when the sound of hurried footsteps echoed in the hallway. A frantic knock. Then the door burst open. "Mr. Blackwood." It was Margaret, the senior housekeeper. Her voice shook. "It's Evie. She's burning up." Julian was on his feet instantly, his chair clattering to the floor behind him. The numbers on the screen meant nothing now. All he could see was Evie. By the time he reached her room, the little girl was curled up in bed, her small frame trembling beneath the covers. The light was dim, but her face was visibly flushed, cheeks the color of roses pressed too tightly between book pages. Her lips parted in soft, broken whimpers. The nurse on night duty had arrived before him and was already at the bedside, trying to take her temperature. But Evie shrank away, eyes wide with terror, arms flailing weakly. "No," she sobbed. "No, no." Julian stepped closer and knelt, his usually cold voice now threaded with desperation. "Evie, it's me, Uncle Julian. I'm right here." But her fevered eyes didn't focus on him. She looked past him, toward the door. "Callie," she whispered. "Callie." Julian turned to the nurse, his voice low and urgent. "Get her! Now!" Moments later, Callie appeared in the doorway, breathless, barefoot, hair tousled from sleep. Her eyes found Evie immediately. "Callie," the child whimpered, reaching out. Without hesitation, Callie crossed the room, climbed onto the bed, and gathered the trembling girl into her arms. Her touch was gentle but sure, the kind of embrace that said, "I won't let go, ever." "I'm here, baby," she whispered against Evie's temple. "I've got you. I'm here." Evie buried her face into Callie's chest and sobbed until the pain gave way to quiet exhaustion. The nurse stepped back, silent. Everyone did. The air shifted. It was just them now, Callie and Evie, the only ones that mattered. The fever didn't break for hours. Callie never left the bed. She held Evie close, wiping sweat from her brow with a damp cloth, whispering stories through cracked lips, humming old lullabies in a trembling voice. Her hands shook, but her resolve never did. Julian stayed outside the door. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, helpless, with hands curled into fists at his sides, grieving his own powerlessness. He had built empires, run billion-dollar deals. As dawn approached, Julian sank to the floor, back against the cold wood of the doorframe. Inside, Callie's soft voice continued, steady and soothing. "I'm not going anywhere," she murmured. "You're safe." And finally, just before sunrise, Evie's breathing slowed, her tiny fists unclenched, her body stilled. She was asleep, safe in Callie's arms. Julian exhaled, pressing his hands to his face. He didn't cry, not quite, but something sharp and burning sat just behind his eyes. Callie had done what he couldn't, what no amount of money or power could achieve. She had reached Evie's heart. Julian looked down at his hands made for contracts, for control, not for comfort. He clenched them slowly, then whispered to himself, so low even the silence barely caught it. "She's the only one both of us need." Something had shifted in the Blackwood estate. Breakfasts were no longer silent. Evie now insisted on sitting next to Julian, babbling in fragments, showing him her crayon drawings with proud little grins. At night, laughter echoed down hallways once filled only with footsteps and closed doors. Books lined the nursery floor, tales of forests and fairies and faraway hope. Callie was everywhere and nowhere, quiet in her presence, but felt in every room. She brought warmth, not by trying, just by being. Even the staff felt it. They smiled more. They spoke freely. For the first time in years, the house felt human. Julian noticed it too. He noticed how his suit jackets hung untouched for days, how his calendar had one fewer line each month. The firm was preparing for the biggest move in its history, an international IPO in partnership with a Swiss equity conglomerate. The deal was valued at over $500 million, promising to launch Blackwood Capital into a global spotlight. Everything had been timed to perfection. Contracts drafted, press lined up. Even Julian's notoriously private lifestyle was being strategically softened for the cameras. The Swiss group, however, was strict. Their ethics clause, outlined in fine print, every executive must uphold an image that aligns with global corporate governance values. Personal relationships with domestic staff must be disclosed or terminated if found compromising to brand integrity. At first, Julian dismissed it. He had nothing to disclose, until the photo surfaced. A paparazzi shot, taken through the garden hedge, caught Julian holding Callie's hand while she knelt to tie Evie's shoe. Nothing romantic, nothing posed, just a moment. But moments become headlines. Billionaire CEO dating the help. Power dynamics, or real love. Forums exploded. Shareholders panicked. The Swiss board called an emergency meeting, and the email arrived. Mr. Blackwood, in accordance with IPO compliance protocols, we request written clarification regarding your relationship with Miss Callie Moore. We advise discontinuation of said relationship to preserve corporate integrity. The board met him that evening. "Julian," said one partner gently, "we all know you've been through a lot, but this is business." Julian sat alone in his office long after they left. The city skyline stretched below, a blur of gold and glass, but his eyes were on his reflection in the window. Who was he without the title? Without the empire? He saw Callie in his mind, the night Evie burned with fever, her calm hands, her whispered lullabies. He remembered the birthday card. "Here's a reminder that you're still human." He hadn't asked for it, but she gave it anyway. His hands shook, not with fear, but with clarity. If he signed those papers, if he gave her up to keep this empire, he would prove everyone right. That he was just another man in a suit. And he would never forgive himself. The next morning, the boardroom was silent. All the major stakeholders were seated, eyes on him, pens poised. Julian walked in calmly, took his seat. The contract was placed before him, the pen beside it. He read every word. Then, slowly, deliberately, set the pen down. "I'm not signing," he said. Murmurs, shocked glances. He stood, straightened his jacket. "I spent my whole life building." He looked around the room. "But someone once reminded me that being human doesn't make me weak, it makes me whole." He picked up the unsigned contract. "And I won't trade the part of me that feels, just to keep the part that commands." He walked out, leaving $500 million and the CEO title behind. The board sat stunned. No one moved. Because in a world built on power, Julian Blackwood had chosen love. They called him a fool, a billionaire who gave up the world for a woman who once swept his floors and tucked in his niece at night. Pundits dissected his decision. The news ran headlines for days. CEO walks out of $500 deal. For love. Julian Blackwood, hero or headline? Is this what happens when power falls for a nanny? The stock price plummeted. Shareholders panicked. Julian? He didn't flinch. He stopped checking the markets, stopped wearing cufflinks, stopped caring about boardrooms and balance sheets. Instead, every morning, he woke up to make pancakes with Evie. He packed her lunches with tiny notes that said, "You are braver than you think." He read bedtime stories again, poorly, but passionately, and kissed her forehead before the nightlight flicked on. Callie stayed. Quiet at first, unsure of his choice. A few months later, he filed the paperwork quietly. Blackwood Capital officially changed hands. No press release, no farewell speech. He turned his attention to something else entirely. The Lila Foundation, named after the sister he lost too soon, created for children who lost even more. It started small, a few volunteers, 2 counselors, and a converted brownstone in Brooklyn. But the mission was big. To remind the forgotten that they still mattered. Julian poured himself into it, not as a public figure, but as a man trying to rebuild something real. And when it came time to open the doors for the very first time, the board asked if he wanted to make a speech. He didn't hesitate. Standing under soft string lights, in front of a crowd of donors, survivors, and volunteers, Julian stepped up to the small wooden podium. He wasn't in a suit. He wore a simple navy sweater, no tie. There was no script. He just looked out at them, then down at Callie and Evie in the front row. "I spent most of my life trying to control everything," he began. "My name, my company, my emotions." A pause. But someone reminded me that the point of life isn't to control it, it's to live it, to love through it. He nodded toward them. "And today, I stop controlling. I start living. The audience erupted into applause. He stopped in front of Callie. She stood slowly, confused. And then, he knelt. Not with a ring, but with something else. In his hands was a box. Callie opened it. Inside, a brand new pair of white shoes. Elegant, simple, beautiful. She gasped softly, recognizing the reference instantly. The old, worn-out pair she used to wear, patched, cracked, threadbare, were gone now. This was his answer. Julian looked up at her, eyes full of quiet emotion. "You gave me a birthday I'll never forget," he said. "Now, let me give you a life where you never walk barefoot again." Callie pressed her hands to her face, tears already spilling down. A single clap echoed. Then another, and another. The entire hall rose to its feet. Not for the shoes, not for the gesture, but for the man who once ruled from a glass tower, now kneeling in front of the woman who taught him how to feel again. The moment went viral overnight. But Julian never watched the clip. He only watched Evie run into Callie's arms after the ceremony, laughing like a man who finally came home. The sun had just begun to stretch across the wooden floors of the quiet house, golden light slipping through the sheer curtains in Evie's room. Morning dew still clung to the grass outside. Inside, Callie moved gently, gathering scattered picture books from the night before. The room smelled faintly of crayons and lavender. She hummed a soft tune as she picked up a stack of drawings, Evie's of course, scribbles of birds, stars, and stick figures holding hands. Some were wrinkled. Others had tiny haphazard hearts drawn in the corners. Just as she placed them back on the shelf, she felt a pair of small arms wrap around her from behind. "Mommy, Callie." The world went quiet. Callie froze. Not in fear, not in confusion, but in wonder. Her breath caught in her throat as she slowly turned to face Evie. The little girl's blonde curls were a tangled halo around her sleepy face. Her eyes looked up, wide and clear, and certain. Callie knelt down to meet her at eye level, heart pounding. "What did you say, sweetheart?" Evie hesitated for a second, then nodded, repeating softly, "Mommy, Callie." Callie's hand went to her chest. Her heart ached in the most beautiful way. She pulled Evie into her arms and held her there, rocking gently, no words, just tears, silent and warm. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The way his lips curved into a quiet smile, the way his eyes shimmered, he felt it too. Something real, something earned. A family. Weeks passed. The house outside the city had become a home, not a mansion, not a showpiece, but a warm, lived-in haven. There were no more security teams stationed at the gate, no private chefs in the kitchen, no polished marble coldness. Just morning pancakes, laughter echoing down the hallway, and tiny socks lost in laundry piles. Julian prepared Evie's lunches every morning, a small box filled with cut-up fruit, cheese stars, and always, a folded paper crane resting gently on top. Callie had kept them all. Each one. At night, they took turns reading stories. Evie chose the books, Julian still read too fast, and Callie always corrected him. It became a game, a tradition. During the day, Callie worked at the local children's center. Not for a paycheck, but for purpose. She taught art to little ones with quiet eyes and heavy hearts, children who had lost too much, too young. She sat beside them, patient and calm, teaching them how to draw, how to speak through color, how to let pain out through stories and paper cranes, just like she had once done for Evie. And when she came home, there was always simple, soft, sacred. And every so often, Evie would climb into Callie's lap, look up, and say it again, like it was the most natural word in the world. Mommy. Not Callie. Just Mommy. And Julian would glance across the room, his eyes catching hers. No words. Just a shared truth between them. She wasn't just the nanny anymore. She was something more. She was home. The soft patter of rain tapped gently against the kitchen window. Outside, the sky was a sleepy gray. Inside, the little house glowed with a quiet kind of light, the kind that didn't come from lamps or candles, but from laughter, warmth, and the comfort of belonging. Callie stood at the counter, waiting for the coffee to brew. The scent of cinnamon rolls lingered in the air. Julian's attempt at baking had left flour everywhere, but none of them seemed to mind. At the corner of the room, Evie sat cross-legged by the window, a box of crayons scattered around her. She was humming to herself, coloring a bright pink sun above a stick-figure family, two tall ones, one small. Julian walked in from the hallway, hair damp from the shower, sleeves rolled up. He leaned down beside Julian, grinned. Then, "I'm just being dramatic." Callie turned around, smiling at the scene. Her smile widened as she saw Julian glance her way, that familiar softness in his eyes, the same look he used to give her from afar, before he knew how to name it. She reached down to grab her shoes, simple white flats, worn but beloved. As she slid her foot in, one slipped from her fingers and fell to the floor with a soft thud. Before she could bend down, Julian was already there. He knelt in front of her, one knee to the hardwood, the same way he had done months ago. Without a word, he picked up the shoe and placed it gently on her foot. Then, slowly, he tied the laces with careful fingers. Callie's breath hitched. His voice was low, steady, full of the weight only truth could carry. "This time," he said, meeting her eyes, "you'll never walk barefoot again." She didn't speak. She couldn't. Her heart had leapt too fast. But she cupped his face with her hand, and in that moment, they said everything without a single word. Evie ran toward them, pink dress fluttering around her knees, arms flung wide. "Group hug," she yelled with glee. They laughed as she collided into them, her tiny arms wrapping around their waists. Julian scooped her up, holding her in one arm as Callie leaned into his side. Rain fell gently outside, tapping its rhythm on the tin roof. Later that evening, the three of them sat together on the porch, swing beneath the eaves, watching the drizzle shimmer in the garden. The wind was soft. The earth smelled of wet grass and peace. Callie curled beside Julian, her head resting on his shoulder. None of them spoke for a long time. There was no need. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of love, of memory, of healing. Evie leaned her head against Callie and whispered, "This is my favorite place." Julian looked at them both. He had once believed he would live and die alone in a house of silence. But now there was laughter. There was coffee in the morning. There were crayons on the floor and paper cranes on the windowsill. There was a woman who reminded him he was human, and a child who reminded him how to hope. He exhaled, and the words came out like a vow. "This feels like home." And the rain kept falling, but inside, they were warm. If this story touched your heart, even just a little, then we hope it reminded you that no one is ever truly alone, and even the coldest hearts can still learn to love again. Some gifts don't come in boxes. Sometimes they come in the form of a simple birthday card, or a barefoot girl who dared to care. If you believe in stories that heal, stories that restore faith in love, kindness, and quiet courage, subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories and hit that hype button to support our next tale. Your support helps us